sitting here with Patrick Jones, the founder of Patrick Jones Baseball. You've probably come across him on Twitter at some point if you're in the baseball world, Twitter or Instagram or really social media. Like you're kind of all over the place, which is great in a good way. But thanks for joining me, man. I appreciate it.
Jeff, thanks for having me, man. I really do appreciate it, and hopefully I can add some value.
Yeah. Hopefully I can ask you enough questions for you to. So Xavier, we're both Big East guys. You played ball at Xavier, I think a couple years ahead of me.
Yep, played ball at Xavier. I left in 2015. Had a ton of fun there. It was a really good experience. Big East is good baseball conference. Ton of fun. First few years I didn't play very much, but the last few years I was able to get on the field a little bit and play and experience some good baseball. So it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed the campus and the school. This campus is smaller, which I liked. So it was nice. It was the perfect fit for me, I would say.
Yeah. You guys had the dimensions of the field were like weird. It was that monster kind of in left. And then isn't there a hill in right, if I recall?
Yeah, there's a hill up the warning track. There's a hill up the warning track a little bit. So if you're running back on the ball and then you have to run up that hill at the very last 5-6 feet. But yep. Yeah, we call them Hayden bombs. It's Hayden Field. So it's Hayden bombs because it's only 310 down the left field line. So it's definitely a hitter's park. We'll just say that. It's definitely a hitter's park.
It was. I don't think I ever hit one out there, but it was a hitter's park. How did you what's the story of you getting there? Like getting recruited? I know you got recruited by a few different schools. What made you choose Xavier?
I think the main thing, and this is something that I try to emphasize to the players I work with now, is I just felt wanted more there than not necessarily that the other schools didn't necessarily want me, but I just felt more wanted there. And there's, different ways that can happen. One, just via the scholarship, or the scholarship was a bigger percentage. And that's going to be a little bit different because sometimes you're early to the party. Sometimes you're a little bit late to the party, the recruiting in terms of how much money that they have. So I'd say that's the first thing. I think the second thing was just probably like the overall team. When I went there to visit, like all the teammates, everybody seemed to really just love it a ton. So I think more than anything, you can tell a lot by a program by just talking to the current players. And you're always going to have one or two maybe don't have a great experience, but by and large, everybody had a great experience. And then lastly, I wanted to stay very close to home, and I actually could walk there from my house that I grew up in. So it couldn't have gotten any closer. So I would say those are the few different reasons. And it was that first year or two is pretty tough transition for me, but after that it went great. So I'm very happy and fortunate that I got the opportunity, and it was a ton of fun.
Yeah, man, that's great because I know you're helping. That's one of the things you do a lot these days is help kids and connecting them with college coaches just through all the relationships that you've built through the podcast and what you've been doing with Patrick Jones Baseball. So do you take like would you have gone to Xavier again? Is that like would you have done it over? Yeah,
I would have gone to Xavier again. I don't know if Xavier would want me again.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
these days. Yeah,
yes.
Same for me. Yeah.
Yes, but I definitely would. Definitely.
Okay, cool. So I was looking. I'm curious. Obviously, they have the stats online, right? Like you could Google my name, you could Google your name, and it's going to show up with the bio. In your senior year, you had 4 homers. Is that right?
Yep, that sounds right.
And 3 of them came in like the last week.
Yeah, I know.
Or something. Is that
That's right. Yeah, my very last.
They come in bunches.
Yeah, the very last at bat of my college career, the last day was a home run too.
Okay.
So it was good. I wish I could have spread some more of those out earlier.
Hey, doesn't matter when you get.
I know. Yeah, we'll take them, but yeah, it was one of those things. The senior year, we had one of the Big East in 2014 and 2015. It just nothing clicked, and so that was a tough year just because we didn't play well. I didn't play great. At one point I was 0 for 27 my 5th year, so that was not a ton of fun, but it was a great learning experience. I learned a ton from that looking back. So yeah, it was a tough year, and then finished strong, but at that point we were definitely out of it. We didn't even make the Big East tournament. What were you guys at that year?
Um, 2015, I think. Was that in Omaha? See, all of them kind of blend together for me at this
Yeah.
point. Like some are in Omaha, one was in Aberdeen, I guess, down there. 2015. I forget. I mean, we would always make the tournament,
Yeah.
but something would always kind of go wrong in the
Yeah.
tournament. we, and we couldn't get it done, unfortunately.
You
It's
guys
one of the
had some
things I
good
wish
players, though. I remember some
we
good
did. Yeah, we had
pitching, some
really.
good players. You guys always had a good team.
Yeah. Well, so did you guys with the like. I remember at our place, it was like Jernigan was like putting balls out, and our field was huge,
Yeah.
and it would be BP, and he's putting balls out like to dead center field, and we're like, nobody hits balls out there. Like, this dude can swing it. And then the big pitcher was really good too, lefty. Forget his name, but
yeah,
it was,
Andre, he's first of all just a great guy in general, but yeah, he had some raw tools that were crazy, very, very powerful, and hit some balls very, very far. So he was a good player. Ended up getting drafted by the Twins organization.
yeah, for sure. Yep. Um, so all right. The reason I brought up that the last week is because a lot of what you talk about is the mental game
Mm-hmm.
and mental skills. So we'll get into the story of Patrick Jones baseball and how that all started. But can you recall what you were thinking during that time, or a lack of what you were thinking? Like, for you to hit 3 bombs in 1 week.
Oh, and that I remember. Well, I think what ended up happening was, I had that 0 for 27 streak, and I'm sure you know the feeling being when you're an older player. At the time, I was a fifth year senior. I was 23, and I just I ended up losing my starting spot to an 18-year-old, to a freshman. When you're 23 and you're going into that season like, man, maybe I could get drafted and all these different things. Which at 23 years old, not sure how realistic those those hopes were, but still. And so I remember just being like, man, like, how did I even get here to this point? Like this, it just felt like everything happened so fast when that 0 for 27 streak, and then at the very end, I was struggling so much. I remember walking up to the plate, being like, I don't even care anymore. I'm just going to go up there. I'm going to be so relaxed. I don't care what happens at all. And that at bat was my first hit back for that 0 for 27, a double down the line. And then the rest I just took off. And so I learned from that more than anything, like less is more. I was very relaxed the rest of the season, and that allowed me to see the ball better, allowed me to hit better, be more consistent. So it just came down to I was just trying too hard. And so when I started to care less and be more relaxed and not be so outcome driven, that's when I ended up having the success. Unfortunately, like I said, it was a little bit late at 23 years old and last couple of weeks of the season, you're figuring that out. But I still figured it out, and luckily I ended up failing and struggling. So hopefully a lot of the other kids that I work with don't have to as much now.
Sure. Better late than never, as they say. But I mean, I'm sure that probably sparked what you wanted to do after school. I forget where I heard this. It might have. I hope it wasn't one of your things, because that'll kind of be embarrassing. But it was about Derek Jeter and how he was at one point like over something like that, like over 26 or over 30, and people would ask him about it, and he'd be like they would ask him like what he's thinking about struggling. He'd be like, "Hey, I'm just one step closer to getting a hit." He's like, "I can't go hitless for that much longer." He's like, "I've already been over 35. Like, I can't go over 70." So yeah. It was just kind of the mental reframe, I guess. I don't know.
It is too, and it's so level dependent as well. You look at somebody like a Derek Jeter, who's like, he's going to get, if he goes 0 for 100, like he's probably still going to be in there at that point. He's a Hall of Famer. He's that type of thing. Whereas, Patrick Jones, like we could find somebody who could probably replace him just as easy. And so I think that's the hard thing with players nowadays is, if they don't do well, especially at the college level, I'll see this. If they don't do well in a game or two, then the next game they're on the bench. And so that forces them in their brain to just attach to hey, I didn't get a hit. So that means you're probably not going to play the next game. And so now you're solely focusing on being so outcome oriented. And that's just not a healthy place to be. So that's something that I try to, again, teach and emphasize and guide the younger players towards.
Can totally relate. That was me. Yeah, I was totally outcome driven, and when it was going bad, It's like, dude, you don't want to talk. Yeah, you don't want to talk to anybody. You don't want to do
No.
anything. It's and when it's going great, you almost attach that's something you hear all the time. It's like you attach your identity to it a little bit. When it's like separating that outcome, it's hard to teach to a college kid, let alone a high school kid. I know you work with a lot of that demographic. So
It's
yeah,
hard to teach it, but it's if you think back, Joe, when we're young kids, and I think this is why we are programmed this way. When you're a young kid and you're playing baseball for the first time, first couple of years, you see everyone be so happy when you get a hit, and then when you get out or strike out, you see everybody, your family or coach, whatever, like kind of be sad, and so you start to tag your brain tags. Oh, getting a hit is good. That's going to make everybody happy, and then when I get out or strike out, that's what makes everybody sad, and so you pick up on that at such a young age, and then you just, since that attachment forms, you just continue that, and it just grows and grows and grows the older you get. So that's why I think at a young age, like worrying about hits and things like that, like I try to emphasize just playing hard, and whether you go 0 for 4 or 4 for 4, like I try not to have necessarily any type of bigger or more applause for players just because of outcome, because I just don't want them to have that for their brain to tag that early on.
It's an awesome point. Yeah. Because the success kind of comes in the work. Like that's where the success lies is in the process of what you're doing, really, which again is easier said than done. So, but I'm curious to hear for you. So you finished up at Xavier, didn't really have a great senior year from what you're saying. And then what were your thoughts after that? Were you ever going to go get another job? I think because you've played indie ball for a little bit, right?
Yeah, I played independent baseball for 2 years. Didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew that I didn't want to go out that way. I knew I didn't want to end my career the way it ended in college. Like I wanted to go out on a better note, and so that's why I wanted to continue to play. So I ended up playing independent professional baseball first year in Watertown, New York, in the Empire League, and then the second year I was in Adelanto, California. And after that, ended that. But it was just one of those things that just kind of I just didn't want to go out that way. I didn't want to end my baseball career just playing so poorly, and I still wanted to play. Quite frankly, more than anything, I think at the time my mindset was like, if I can play independent baseball at a high level until I'm 30, in my 30s, like I would do it. And I never got that option because I was cut after a couple of years, but and so I was forced to move on. But I lived, eat, sleep, everything baseball. So that's all I wanted to do.
So you hung him up, and then how soon after what was it that you started giving lessons and like forming what Patrick Jones baseball is? Like how soon after was that?
So I started coming up with the idea of doing like a baseball podcast that second year of independent baseball during the season.
What year was that?
2017.
Okay.
2017. Yep.
So that's like early in the podcast game.
Very early. So yeah, it was 2017, and I came back home and I started the podcast, and one of my friends was a high school coach and he needed some help. So I decided to help him, and I was the JV coach of that high school team, and started to give a few lessons here or there. I still didn't necessarily know what I wanted to do or if I even wanted to stay in coaching or whatever, but it was kind of one of those things. There was nothing else that I wanted to do anymore. And so I just continued to continue to coach and work with players. And one thing led to another, just continued down that track, and was able to coach a college summer league that year, and just continued to learn more than anything. I think that's the thing that I love doing is I love learning. I love listening to other people teach and coach, no matter what it is or who it is, that for that matter. And I just think in general, if you're not necessarily growing as a coach, I think you're going to eventually become burned out. So I just am a big fan of continuing to learn, having a growth mindset, and it's fun. Honestly, it's just that's probably the main thing. Is it's fun to continue to just grow and develop as a coach and as a person, and if you do that, then you're going to get better, and players are going to get better. And so there's that trickle down effect. So not to get on a rant here, but that was kind of the shorter version of what happened after I got done playing.
Yeah. What was the story behind? Because then I know you were with the Orioles for a bit as well. So what was the story behind that, and what got you there?
I was at again, kind of what I was saying before. I was going to every coaches conference I could across the country. So I flew out to Phoenix, Arizona, and did a coaches conference, and I met somebody there who introduced me, or forwarded my name, I should say, over to the Orioles and the assistant general manager, Sig Meidel. And he actually started listening to the podcast and things like that too, and reached out to me just emailed me, and then ended up flying out there for an interview. And they were going through a rebuild, or just completely, I shouldn't say rebuild. They were transitioning and flipping over the entire staff and organization at the time. So it was a completely brand new staff. So I ended up getting the hitting coach job there, and so that's honestly how I got it. It was pretty unique, but it's something I'm very grateful for, because I learned a ton. Not sure I would ever want to go back to professional baseball, just because of the lifestyle, and I'm very happy doing what I'm doing. And I like working with players of all ages and skill levels, and not just solely one. But it was an incredible experience. I got to work with some great players and great coaches.
So the podcast kind of led to that opportunity a little bit.
It did. Yeah, it did. I think the thing is, in general, is they like coaches and people who have a growth mindset and who are continuing to learn and want to grow. And I think that's what kills the game, is coaches who just stay in their ways and do the exact same thing over and over again. And so I think what stood out to them, and what stands out to me even now, is people who are continuing to want to learn and have that humility to not think they know everything, and just to have attained the skill of having that growth mindset. Because I think that is something that you can attain no matter who you are. And so that's just something that I think intrigued them, and I think intrigues a lot of people, quite frankly, if you see it.
Agreed. Yeah, because you want to surround yourself with those types of people. That's what I find that, like I kind of have different groups of friends and everything. I'm sure everybody's that way, but like there's some that you don't talk with them about anything. There's some where you're like, it's only you're trying to learn the things from them. Like, are you the same way? I don't know. Because
I think it is unique. I kind of think of it a little bit different. I think a lot of people have buddies. I think there's a difference between having like buddies and then having friends. And so I think that's kind of how I look at it a little bit differently. And buddies are, you go to football games or games with or out with, but friends are a little bit different. You get into those in-depth conversations, and they're going to be there for you when you really need them, and you'll be there for them, vice versa. So I kind of look at it that way more than anything else. And I try to keep that group pretty small, probably just because I just don't think I'm smart enough to remember the names of everybody and that type of a thing. But I don't know. That's just kind of how I look at it more than anything.
It's a good way to look at it. Probably have a lot of buddies. Yeah, I'm not sure. A lot of buddies too. What? All right. So how is Patrick Jones baseball evolved then? So when you started it, and like I was digging into some of your writing and everything, and one of them was like six mistakes that I made as a coach, like earlier in my career. Mm-hmm. Like just talk about maybe the evolution of Patrick Jones baseball, like what it was when you first started it, maybe what the vision was for it. Like was it just lessons and the podcast maybe, or how has it grown since you started?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, early on, I didn't even have necessarily a vision. I was just doing it because it was fun. I enjoyed doing it.
Well, what was it? Sorry to cut you off. Like, what was it? Just lessons?
It was just working with hitters. That was the main thing, doing lessons, and then just doing the podcast. And that was it for several years. That's the only thing that I did. And, when I first started coaching, I think we all make this, I don't know if I want to call it a mistake, but it's usually just the first layer is you focus on mechanics, and everything is mechanical, and that's what you obsess over. And so that's what I did too. Made no mistake about it. And I went and obsessed over how the body moves and the biomechanics, and bought a KVS 3D motion capture system, and everything was just mechanics. And then the older I got, the more longer I did it. It's kind of like, yes, of course, mechanics are important. It's not necessarily that they're not important. It's okay, how do you actually improve mechanics? And most of the time, it's not by talking and obsessing about mechanics, because if you're talking with a hitter and you're constantly emphasizing their swing, how their swing feel, how are they swinging it, you're basically teaching them to solely focus on their swing at all times. And that's what I learned to get away from more than anything else. And by getting away from it and teaching them more the mental skills and the mental side of the game, and having an approach, and teaching them who they are, a lot of times the movement will clean up, and I think they'll end up becoming a better hitter and just become more consistent and productive with time. So I spend a lot of my time just focusing on the mental side, and of course, I mean, it's a ton of fun to focus on the mechanics, and it's the sexy thing. Like, I get it. I'm guilty of it too. At times, I like digging into that stuff. And if you want to get active and clicks and get into arguments on Twitter, mechanics is always going to be the way to go. 100%, it is. I've never had anybody troll me on the mental side of the game, not a single time. But anytime I post something about the mechanics, somebody has something to say, which I always find interesting, because the mechanics are 4th or 5th down on the totem pole of importance. But that's just the way it is, and I don't think I'm going to change that.
Yeah, right. I know you talk about the swing mechanics. It's like you're talking about politics or something like that. Yeah, like it's like you're talking badly about somebody's family.
It's just
crazy, man.
At this point, I honestly don't respond to a lot of that stuff. I used to when I was younger.
Yeah,
I don't respond anymore. It's a complete waste of time. It's just a complete waste of time. So I don't even respond.
Yep. So then a hitter gets to you, like they come there day one. What's the process for you of like evaluating that hitter? How do you break it down?
Yeah, I guess it's so dependent on the age level, and I ask a ton of questions, and there's not necessarily a script of questions that I'll ask, because it's just kind of my gut feeling on my interaction with them, and what they say too. Is this somebody who's going to talk a lot, and it's going to be pretty easy to get the information I need? Or is this somebody that I have to be a little bit more calculated on? Or is this somebody who is a little bit older, and it's going to take a little bit of time. Like, I have to build some trust with them first before I can start digging deep or giving my own thoughts and 2 cents on it. So the timeline is very important. Like, is this going to be a situation where we need to make some changes right now? Or is this something that, we have some time, and so we can be a little bit more patient on? So I would say that's the main thing for me. But I'm a big believer in building that relationship. And I know everybody says that, but I've just noticed if I can talk less about the mechanics early on, I know later on they will try and do anything once I built that trust. So I think I focus on getting them some other types of wins, and we'll talk some other things like the approach or mental game and things like that. Because it just seems like for a lot of players that their own mechanics is kind of like their baby. And so they don't want to lose their baby, I think, early on. And so because of that, I'll just go about it a little bit different way until I build that trust, and then they're willing to let me in on it. So to answer your question, there's not necessarily like one way. I mean, sometimes I'll utilize video on that first visit. Sometimes I won't at all. It kind of just solely is going to depend on the player, that particular type of player, their experience, the level they're at. Are they an analytical type of learner? Are they somebody I need to use numbers and data and proof in order to show them? Or is this somebody who is pretty new, wide-eyed, probably too coachable, and has been too coachable in the past, then I need to go about it a little bit different way. And then the most important thing is going to be, okay, like if this is a high school kid, for example, like there's probably going to be a parent there, and what's that relationship like? Are they somebody who is, very mechanics driven, and that they're always constantly saying something, and just trying to figure out that dynamic and that relationship during that first visit too, because a lot of times people will say it's one way, but you'll come to find out just by asking different questions from that visit, it could be a completely different way than they even perceive it to be. So in a nutshell, that's what I try to do. And I'll test them off velocity and things like that at the machine. I just want to see a few swings, and then I'll be able to ideally see some in-game video, because in-game video, that's the best sign of what they're doing right, what they need to improve upon overall, just that type of a thing. So that's kind of how I go about it. Not sure necessarily how other people go about it in terms,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people want to always have, there's particular systems that they want to have, like a system for evaluating. And I think there's frameworks. I think you could have a framework, but hitting is such an art form that I'm not necessarily big into actually having an actual system for every single little thing when it comes to hitting for myself. And that's not necessarily say that's the right or wrong way. That's just the way that I found to work best for me.
Sure. Well, from what you're saying, what I hear you saying is that it's extremely nuanced. Like there's not one way to go about it. Because imagine if a hitter gets in there and you start going through no good coach obviously is going to do that. Just go through a checklist of questions. Like you have to build that relationship. But I feel like the second you would start doing that, then that guy's probably checking out. He's like, I'm going to go find somebody else on Twitter. If he's smart, probably he should. Right?
If he's smart. And that's the thing. You would be surprised, because there's so many people who are just uneducated, and especially, I mean, you can't blame them, especially some of these parents. They're not from necessarily maybe the sports world, and the players are younger too. And so they're probably going to listen the first time to anybody. And so you hope that they're listening to the right person and you're telling them the right thing, because they're probably going to do it. And then the older that they get and they have more experience they have, if you're with a professional player, you're not going to, it's a lot harder you can't just trick them into doing a lot of this stuff. Like they know if you know what you're talking about, and if you care and that type of a thing. So players get that. They're smart the older that they get and the more experience that they have.
Definitely. So how much of your coaching philosophy and maybe some of the systems have come from coaches that you had in the past, or like your own experience, versus learnings from the podcast along the way?
I would say it's a combination of both. I don't think you can ever replicate in-person experience. So I think just the actual coaching and in person, that's the number one thing that I've learned more than anything. That's how I've learned most of what I teach, and being able to make adjustments from what I teach is from coaching in person. Podcast, it's been huge, just because you'll learn different things, and then you'll make connections that if you get stuck later on, you can reach out to a particular guest who maybe has a very high skill set in that particular area that you need help in. And so I think that's what I found to be very helpful. But I have had a ton of good coaches who I have learned from in the past and continuing to do so today. And that's not necessarily solely in baseball, and it's not even solely necessarily in sports in general. It's just, it's different frameworks. It's different way of thinking about things, because again, you're dealing with human beings. And a lot of what I do is it's disguised as baseball and as hitting, but at the end of the day, it's about limiting, it's about taking away a hitter's limiting beliefs about themselves, because everyone has limiting beliefs about themselves. And so we're trying to peel back that onion and trying to figure out like what are those limiting beliefs, why, and then taking a game plan and trying to, put a knife through that and get rid of them for good. And so a lot of that is applicable to their lives too. So I always try to think about things in that type of a context, because I know that if I can help them get rid of those limiting beliefs as a person, all those fears that they have, like we all have, they're going to be happier, And a lot of times when people become happier, they're going to become better players too, because if you're having fun, if you're happier, you're going to be freed up. And so it's disguised as baseball because that's what I know, but it's more so about just understanding how humans operate. And once you understand how human beings operate, you're kind of set for life, because human behavior, in at least the thousands of years since we've been around, it just hasn't changed. So I think that's the thing that I've learned more than anything else.
Yeah, that's so true. The limiting belief. So, because I'm still coaching these days too. Like I coach a 17-year-old team, which I think I told you on the phone,
Yep.
and then I'm working a 9 to 5, and I almost find at times I show up as like two different people. Like for the coaching, it's like, all right, that's me. It's probably going to be more authentic, and then at times for the 9 to 5, it's like I don't even know if I would classify it as limiting beliefs, or if at times it's more so like, dude, I just don't really enjoy this as much. So I let myself kind of hold it back a little bit. I don't know. That's just kind of a random thought, but it's interesting. Like when you break that down, you think of like there's certain players, like you don't know what's going on maybe at home, like the behind the scenes stuff is kind of interesting to me too. So just breaking it down.
Yeah, it is the behind the scenes stuff. Who's in their ear? Who's in their ear when you're not around, and what are they saying to them, and all that stuff plays a factor. And to your point, I mean, I think limiting beliefs. I think fear in general. I always ask players like, what do you think would happen if you didn't have any fear in the box? Like if fear was completely eliminated. Here we are talking about all this mechanical stuff and changing all this mechanical stuff and obsessing over your swing. What if we just got rid of the fear? What would happen then? Of course, we know what would happen then. Like you'd be playing so much better. It wouldn't even be funny. And so I think that's the thing that I've enjoyed more than anything is hearing that feedback. I've had very few people, Joe, text me and be like, oh, like, thanks so much for fixing my swing. It's more so about like, thanks so much for helping me deal with the mental side of the game, and now I'm able to not freak out when I do fail and make adjustments and stay the course and not be on this roller coaster ride. And so I think for me, that's what I try to do is just, and it's not that I'm necessarily like obsessed with the mental game or anything. I'm just more so obsessed into what I have seen help players more than anything. And so if mechanics start helping players more in the mental game, then I'll be on here. I talk obsessing about the mechanics and things like that, but I just haven't seen that to be the case. And so because of that, I don't necessarily obsess over it.
Yeah. You are obsessed with getting hitters better though. Yes. Whichever way, or however you can. What was I just gonna, so you've seen tons of players come through your facility, like players that you've worked with. Are there some commonalities amongst the ones that have the most success? Like, and success can be arbitrary, I guess. Like maybe go on to have the best careers, maybe.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the first one, which is the obvious one, is you have to have some physical skills. I mean, if you're somebody who just doesn't have those physical skills, you can be the most obsessed, hungry person in the world. You're not going to go to the highest level possible. But I would say just because you have those physical skills also doesn't mean that you're going to go to the highest level possible. There's several things that have to be working. And the first thing is the physical skills. And then the second thing is you have to be obsessed with it. If you're obsessed, a lot of times you're going to find out the right answer that you're searching for, you're looking for, because you're obsessed. And you don't necessarily want to solely copy what other people are doing or what other players are doing, because that's personal to them. You're such a unique individual that you can maybe take one of the things, but you don't want to do exactly what they're doing, because that won't lead you to where they've gotten. And I think that's hard for people to understand. And it's hard for people to understand because everyone wants that something to work fast, right? They want that instant gratification. And so that's why you have to be obsessed, because it's going to take time, and you have to learn yourself and learn what works and what doesn't work. And so I think that's the thing that I've noticed with the best players is they're obsessed. They're hungry. They want to learn. They want to get better, and they just keep repeating it time and time and time again. And they don't let failure keep them down for a long time. They limit how long failure keeps them down for. And so I think if you have those traits, and I think anybody can have two of those three. You can't always control the physical, only a little bit, but you can control, hey, if you're obsessed, if you're wanting, if you're hungry, and if you can limit how long you let failure affect you for too. So I think anybody can have two of the three, but the best players that I've seen they have all three.
Sure. And I feel like I've asked this question a few times to people on here, but you think that those can be learned? Like the answers to this have varied. Like some are like, I don't think so. Like those are kind of just like innate qualities, but others have been like, yeah, sure, you can learn the other ones. Obviously not the physical, but
no, not the physical, but I don't think you can learn obsession though, because you have to love that. You have to love it. You have to love it. And you can't make somebody love something. And so I don't think you can necessarily learn that. But I think if you are obsessed, you can learn how long to limit failure in the mental side, because the mental side, those are skills too. That's just mental skills, no different than physical skills or, your mechanics in your swing or anything. They're just different skills that you can't see, but they're still skills. And so I think if you have the obsession, you can definitely learn the mental skills, but you need to have that obsession, and that you can't teach. But if they have that, you can definitely teach them the mental skills.
Definitely. I agree with you. Yeah. But I do think you would be able to find it. Like if you just keep, I don't know, like there's so that's something that you talk about too, like the consistency versus chasing that shiny object, which has been a problem for me, honestly, probably dating back to playing. Like, so when you were talking about it's personal to them, I remember my senior year, that's when Josh Donaldson was like the guy.
Yep.
And like he had that really distinct and I started doing that, and that did not work well. Like it might have worked well in the batting cage, but when I got into the games, that did not work well. But so what I was saying was, I guess the consistency versus chasing the shiny object, like there's nuance in that too, right? It's like, you kind of have to explore different things and find what you love. But you also got to give something a shot, right? What are your thoughts?
You got to give something a shot. And I think that the thing is are you trying to force something, or is this something that feels natural to you? Because if you're trying to force something, more than likely than not, it's probably not going to be the best for you. And it's not, something that you're going to benefit from. But if it feels natural to you, of course. I think though, in general, we also get so uptight about not being good or not seeing results right away. And the second we don't start seeing results, we abort ship and just go back to whatever's safe. And so I think in general, you have to be okay as a baseball player and as a hitter specifically with just not necessarily seeing, good things, bad things, whatever, not putting labels on anything for a certain amount of time, because there's going to be days when you feel bad, when your swing feels bad, when you're not hitting, all these things. It's like, okay, like now what do you do then? Because most players are going to revert back to what's comfortable and safe, as most people do. But I think if you're committed to whatever it is you're doing, or going to give it an actual shot, and you're going to consistently work at it, then I think over time you'll be able to see those changes. But a lot of times change, you're just trying to get a little bit better. You're not going to make these huge, massive jumps in a short amount of time. I know everyone wants to believe that, and there may be some outlier stories, but just come under the consideration that's not probably going to be you, right? That's probably not going to be you. And if it happens, great, but don't think it's going to be you. And so I think if you have that mindset, you're solely just more so focused on the process versus having that outcome.
Well, that's why people don't get started, right? Because you think that, if you don't have a solution in a week, you're like, all right, screw this. I'm good. Like, I'm just going to move on. So the 1% better idea.
Yeah. And I think, Joe Ferrara, right?
Joe Ferrara.
Yeah, that's right. He's the man.
You go, Joe.
I think in general, it's also like, what is the goal? I think that's something that I think is important. Like what are we trying to do here? Because if the goal is something that is outcome based, I don't think that's a great goal to particularly have. I'm sure there's people out there like who can say like, oh, I had this outcome goal and it ended up pushing me and things like that. I definitely get that. But I think if you can change that goal into something that is as simple as creating the best version of yourself as a player possible, or being as prepared as you possibly can. That's solely the goal, or you just playing the game. You playing the game is the goal. Like that in of itself is enough reward than anything else. I think if you can make that transition, then you're going to be in a much better spot. And whatever happens, happens, because we can't control outcomes, just like you can't control how many downloads this podcast is going to have. And so if you started obsessing over downloads and numbers and things like that, then you're going to be on this roller coaster ride of emotions, and you may eventually get burned out and that type of thing. But if you solely are your mindset is more so towards, hey, my goal is to make the best episode I possibly can. That is the only goal. I don't care if anybody listens to this thing. Then you're going to be much happier. You're going to be fulfilled. And probably more times than not, it's going to be so good that there are going to be people who listen to it. And so if players can solely make that transition into making their mindset and their goal and what they want is to play the game and be as prepared as they possibly can, and that's the goal, is just to be as prepared as you possibly can and just playing the game, probably the outcome is going to be better than if you obsessed over the outcome.
That was pretty good. Yeah, that was the mic drop right there, I feel like. I mean, that's like, it's so true, but it's in the era, in the day and age that we live in, social media, everything's very social media driven. The shiny, like,
well, I'm
kids of
I'm the reason I'm saying all this stuff is because I'm as guilty as everybody else. And I was listening to a podcast one time about Steve Jobs, and because I like listening to a lot of things that aren't even sports related, and someone asked, I don't even remember what the question was, but Steve Jobs basically like, look, at the end of the day, I only try to do one thing. I only try to make products that I'm proud of. That's it. That's it. And to me, that struck a chord with me. It was like, wow, he doesn't care about money. He doesn't care about fame. He doesn't care about what the public thinks or how much they want him. His goal is to make something he's proud of. And so I think for me too, is like, that's what I try to do is, am I creating something that I'm proud of? And proud is not determined by any particular outcome.
Yeah, man, that's really good. So not to change the direction of this, but the reason why I started this is it's called the Post Game Podcast, and I kind of was trying to find my footing for a couple years after college. Like I was burnt out. Like I didn't want to. I had an opportunity to play indie ball, and I was like, dude, screw that. I'm gonna go work and like hang out with my friends. So
yeah, make some money. Yeah,
pretty much. But then what I keep saying too is like, that's not sustainable. Like that's not fun, especially if you didn't. And not that I didn't close the book on that chapter, but there was some stuff that I was probably like, all right, dude, was everything left out on the table? And I don't know if that was the case, but so that's why I started this, because I found that in talking to other guys that I played with, or like some veterans, like military vets that I work with, like they have a hard time going from that one thing to the next thing. And you seem to do that pretty seamlessly, like just with starting, at least on the surface, with what you got to.
On the surface.
Okay.
Yeah. On
so,
the surface.
Right. On this. Yeah.
I mean, I think I remember getting done playing, and I had one of my uncle owns a company, and I remember helping out there for a couple days, and I came home one day, suit and tie. I remember being like, I would rather do anything than work a regular job. And so I was like, I didn't care what it was. I know I said earlier, like, I'll play indie ball until I'm 35. I don't care. But yeah, there was definitely times where I was like, what am I going to do? And I think at the time I was also just thinking like, how am I going to make a living? I think probably my parents were more concerned with that than I was, but I think that was the thing too, is there's these doubts. And you're not sure, but you have certain people who continue believing in you and continue pushing you. And I think too, in general, even for what I do, like on the internet and social media, like your competition isn't as large of a bucket as you think, because so many people are afraid to just show up consistently and put themselves out there. And so if you can just show up consistently and put yourself out there, it's going to be almost impossible to lose over the long haul. So I think that's something I was like, well, you know what? I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I can show up, and I will put myself out there. And so I knew I'd be able to make adjustments from having a growth mindset and wanting to learn and things like that too. And I'll be honest, I still have days where, and it's kind of that, my monkey brain coming back, that fear of like, I might lose it all. Maybe nobody wants to work with me anymore. Maybe nobody thinks I'm good. I still have that. And kind of deep down, it's kind of a sick feeling, but I kind of like that, because it pushes me and it makes me never satisfied. And, I heard this one time. It was like, if you go to bed on a win, you'll wake up with a loss. And so I try to never think I'm that great or smart. I don't care what anybody says. I just focus on, the work I need to get done, and whatever happens. But I still have those fears to this day of thinking that I'm going to lose everything and nobody's going to work with me, and I'm going to have to go get a regular job and it's going to be the end of the world. So I still have that fear.
Don't do that. Yeah, don't go get it right. I think you're doing pretty good. But yeah, it's like, you're never as good as they say, never as bad as they say.
Let me ask you a question. Sure. If you could go back, because do you think you still would have, knowing what you know now, would you still have gone and got that regular 9-to-5 job, or would you have taken a risk or taken a chance and done something else?
You know what? I've never really, I have thought about that, but I've never had anybody ask me that. I would probably still go get the job, because I just wasn't in love with playing baseball anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I struggled throwing the ball. So like Jason Kuhn, eat that guy, whatever that guy is got to say, I like eat it up. And even like, it'll come back. Like if I'm throwing BP or something, like I'll get a little yippy and I'm like, all right, dude, like let's lock back in. And then you lock back in. But this kind of a roundabout way of getting to what I'm going to say, but just where I was, like, I did not love playing baseball. So whether, but I think that chapter, it was still open a little bit. So that's why I've enjoyed coaching and like kind of closing that loop and like helping kids hopefully get to the next, whatever it is, to school or whatever. So that was it for me. I know some guys can play, like you're saying, play any ball, and they're like, all right, the swing feels better than it ever did. And I'm 32 years old. It's like, and there's nothing wrong with it. Maybe there's the one guy that makes it, but probably wasn't for me. And I'm like, I like to say that I'm super risky, but I really have to go through all my options. I feel like when I have something put out in front of me, like a new job or something like that. So yeah, I don't know.
I think you probably made the smart call, and it sounds like yourself. And so you have to take that into consideration too. Like, what is your own personality, and, what type of lifestyle do you want? And probably right now, because you're coaching and you're working at 9-to-5, like you're able to you're probably not going to get burned out, or at least less likely to get burned out, because you're able to do multiple things versus just solely thinking about one thing all day long. So I think, probably got a good thing going.
It's true, but it definitely time spread thin. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you got some long days.
Yeah. They're long days, but that's, it is what it is. So we'll see how much longer I coach travel ball versus start a family, all that kind of stuff. So, all right, man. Well, I want to let you run. Like I appreciate you coming on here. This was fun. Like I enjoy talking about the mental
it's just
side.
Fun,
yeah. I enjoy what you do with the podcast. The mix of guests is cool. Like from the college coaches to the mental, like you were talking about the mental side of it. What else? I mean, I want to give you the opportunity for people to find your stuff. If you're into baseball, you've probably already seen it, but
yeah, I think the easiest way for people is if you just head to patrickjonesbaseball.com, and you'll see right away, you can sign up for my free newsletter. It's called The Hitting Chronicle. And each week I send out like one tip to help hitters develop. And so we have, over 6,500 players and coaches each week on the list who receive an email. And so I enjoy writing and doing that. And I'd say that's probably the easiest way, just that one way. And I'll, within that newsletter, I'll put in my podcast links and things like that too. So, and then if you want to follow me on social media, it's at P Jones Baseball on Twitter, which is where I'm active at. But I appreciate you having me on, Joe. And if there's anything that I can do to help you, I know you said you not sure how much longer the travel ball thing's going to go for, and if you're going to start a family or whatever. But hopefully, the most important thing is just if you're happy. So if I can help you become more happier, then let me know. We'd love to help.
I'm always in the market for that. So
yeah, heck yeah.
No, but I appreciate that, man, for sure. But we'll definitely stay in touch, and who knows? Yeah, I'm early in this or early for me. The grand scheme of it, I'm not early in podcasting, but from what I'm doing, it's early. I know how many episodes in at this point for you?
Ooh,
is it over 3?
Over 350.
350? That's a
over
ton.
350.
A lot of episodes.
It's just it's compounding. It just compounds over time. You just do a little bit every week, and before you know it, man, it's just crazy time.
350 later.
Yeah, that's how. Seriously though, yeah.
Well, that's good, man. I'll keep following, keep supporting. So, thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep.